Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for our UWC Virtual Visit Day for March 24th, 2021. I'm your host, Marty Bennett, and today for the UWC Virtual Visit Day, we're going to be taking a look at three topics before we start the session today for our meeting with individual college representatives. We're going to take a look at some of the important issues that you're dealing with in your search for the right college or university for you. And we're going to be getting a chance to hear from three experts in the UWC Davis partner family. And we're going to be starting with Karen Bartlett in a few minutes from Middlebury College. And for those of you who have maybe not attended one of our virtual visit days before, we have an opportunity to hear from experts in this first hour as we get ready for the college fair portion of the day, which I know a lot of you are here for and are getting excited about connecting with each of the 26 college representatives that will be in their own rooms, meeting with you over the next 2.5 hours after we finish this first hour of presentations. So we're really looking forward to your opportunities to connect with them. Before we do that, we want to just go through a few housekeeping details. If you have questions on any of the presentations during the session, please feel free to go ahead and use the chat or the Q&A function. We'll be keeping an eye on both of those. And then we'll, in between presentations, if there's time, we'll have the presenter chime in with their answers to the questions that you posed. And we look forward to getting your comments and feedback on this. Thank you for the counselors that are joining in from our UWC schools overseas. United World Colleges are a very special group of secondary schools that we in the higher ed community in the United States really value our relationships with. And in particular, our Davis partner institutions that work with you and your students every day, every year, to find the best options, the best fits for them, and to financially make study at their campuses a reality. And that'll be part of what we talk about today in our third session with Cassie Grosser from Wartburg College on securing financial aid as a Davis UWC scholar. Before we get to that, we'll be hearing from Fran Edwards, talking from Bennington College, talking about applying early and what you need to know and when that process starts and what the options are in the fall when you have deadlines coming up if you decide to apply early, and how that might impact financial aid, because I know that might be a concern for many of you. So before we do that, though, we'll hear from Karen Bartlett on the future of standardized testing for U.S. colleges. For many of you, you've had a year unlike any other year. This is for the whole world really has experienced something that in 100 years hasn't been felt as broadly and as globally as the global pandemic COVID-19 has had on our planet. And we know that it's impacted your schooling. It's impacted what you've been able to do activity-wise. Maybe in some countries, you haven't been able to get back into your UWC school to continue your studies. And maybe you're studying remotely from your home country to attend your classes. For many U.S. colleges, particularly larger institutions, remote instruction has been a norm. Hybrid instruction, where you take some classes in person, some classes online, has been very common throughout the United States. For many of our panelists today, there have been either fully in person or hybrid options that they've been able to implement throughout the full academic year. So where things stand for the fall, that may be a question that many of you have. I know if you've been following the news in the United States, the vaccine plans we have 3 already approved vaccines that are available, maybe soon a 4th. So we certainly are blessed here in the United States where we have many options. I know that might not be the case everywhere in the world. Certainly isn't the case everywhere in the world. And we are on track. Our new president, Joe Biden, has said that any adult male, any adult that wants to have 18 or up, maybe even 16 or up, that wants to have a vaccine can do so by by May, so starting in May. So that's certainly encouraging. Some states are further along the lines of vaccination than others. I've had my first shot. I know many of the UWC reps that you'll be, or Davis partner college reps that you'll be meeting with today, they might have stories as well. Most of us have a two-step shot that we're taking. So plans are, with the vaccinations rolling out, that many, though some have released their plans already for the fall, that they intend to be fully in person. Some have not yet made that final decision. So there'll be some movement on that in the coming months, and certainly the schools that you might be considering, you'll want to follow that. And if you're an IB1 student right now in your first year of the diploma program, this may be a long way off for you in terms of getting to campus in the fall of 2022. But we're certainly going to spend some time, and what campus looks like then will be very different than perhaps what it looked like last fall, and different than what it might look like this fall. So by then, hopefully we're all back to more normal, but there may be some very significant changes going on college campuses and the way classes are taught, particularly larger classes are taught. That's how health and safety protocols are established on campus, and what might continue on after the pandemic has passed. So there's going to be a lot of movement in the coming months as to what's going on college campuses, and we certainly encourage each of you to have your questions ready. And I know once you get into the meeting rooms with the individual representatives, many of them will allow you to do video face-to-face. So it'll be great for you to connect that way with the college counselors, college advisors, college representatives. I know many of the folks who participated in the fall event in September really enjoyed, the college representatives really enjoyed having the video interaction with you. So if you're in a position where you can turn your video on during those individual sessions or during the college fair portion, I'm sure many of the college representatives would enjoy that opportunity to get to see you and see your enthusiasm, see your questions. And it's okay to be nervous, and that's fine, but come prepared. I know a lot of your counselors have been doing all the hard work to get you ready for the day. So we're going to start in just a minute with our first presentation. Just a little bit of a housekeeping for those who are joining late. We will, after the first 3 sessions, if you have questions, you certainly are welcome to use the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll get to those if there's time in between the sessions, in between the presentations. And then when all 3 presentations are done, we're going to give our representatives 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how we end up with time, to get into their individual meeting rooms so that they're ready for the college fair section of the day. So for me, it's my real privilege to present these outstanding panelists to you today, to walk you through some topic areas that are very important, I think, for UWC students as you make the decisions as to where to apply in the coming year. So good luck today. Take advantage of all the opportunities that you have. I will say that all the presentations will be recorded, and the presentations that they make, the present PowerPoints, are going to be converted into PDFs and made available on the landing page for the event. Now, after the presentations are done, while the reps are getting a chance to get into their rooms, I'll explain what the next steps will be for how you can visit each individual college and how long you'll have to do that. So we'll get to that after the 3rd presentation. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Bartlett at Middlebury College. And Karen, if you can pop on your video so I know you're there. There she is. All right, wonderful. And Karen's going to share her presentation with you on the future of standardized testing for U.S. colleges. So Karen, please take it away.
Thanks, Marty. First of all, I'm Karen Bartlett, she, her pronouns, and I'm representing Middlebury College today. And this morning I'll be presenting about sort of the changing landscape of testing, standardized testing in the US. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank Marty for setting up this event today. If there is a silver lining of this pandemic, is that the opportunity to meet with lots of UWC students around the world. As you all know, your schools are in fairly remote parts of the world, and sometimes it takes me days to get to your schools. And today I can roll out of bed, get into my office here, and really meet with so many of you. So I'm really excited for today, and thank Marty again for making this opportunity available to us. So you're seeing today that the landscape of testing in the United States is changing. This is obviously no news to you. And there's some things to talk about in terms of what's happened over the last year. Some of it's really exciting, and so we'll talk about that today. All right. So standardized tests, when I'm talking about sort of the idea of test optional or test blind, really is referring to SAT, ACT, and SAT subject tests. These were tests that were traditionally required by US institutions. And over the last decade, many colleges have opted to go test optional. And within the last year, it's just a watershed moment of colleges deciding to go test optional. And so you saw a huge increase in the number of institutions who are now test optional, where students are given the option of submitting their SAT or their ACT or not. And we pledge that that will not affect you in the college admission process. So the College Board has recognized that there's been a huge decrease in the number of students submitting their scores. And over 1,300 colleges in the US will be test optional this coming year. The College Board is actually phasing out SAT subject tests, so they are maybe only available one more time, but that is not something that will be required because they are no longer sort of available to you as students. And many colleges were already test optional, more going in that direction. And you also may have heard that there's sort of more and more colleges that are rolling out test blind strategy or test blind opportunities for students, which means that if you submit a test or if a test score is somewhere in your file, it will not be considered, it will not be looked at all, even if you submit it. So there's test optional now, and test blind are two things that you need to be on the lookout for. But bottom line, if a test is going to endanger you, if you are traveling across time zones or traveling across country boundaries, or even traveling to take a test in a place, enclosed with students who might be spreading the virus, then we really encourage you to not put yourself in harm's way. Most of the colleges who have gone test optional this year are really thinking about your safety as a student. English proficiency testing is sort of a different category of testing, and in most cases, this is still a requirement for international students. And it's going to vary from school to school what is required. Some students who are in the IB are waived from needing an English proficiency test. Others will require it. So you're going to need to do a little legwork and make sure that you are fulfilling the college's requirements that they ask for. English proficiency testing is a little bit different though. The purpose is not for you to get a perfect score. It's not to take the test over and over to increase that score. It's for us to get an authentic view of your English speaking, writing, and conversation abilities. Because we are colleges by and large that don't have English remediation classes or tracks. We want to make sure that you have the ability to be successful in our English speaking and writing curriculum. And this requires a pretty high level of English. So the idea of English testing is not to sort of trick you. It's really for us to have comfort knowing that you'll be okay in our academic campuses, on our academic campuses. There are some new tests available, and most colleges are trying to be as open to options as possible. And so you will see that there's still obviously the TOEFL and the IELTS, and more and more you'll start to see online versions of those tests, including what's called the TOEFL Essentials being rolled out right now. Colleges are still trying to figure out what that test is all about and whether they'll accept it as one of the English language testing options. But the Duolingo English test has really been a great option that's come to the table in the last decade. And that is something that you can take from your computer, from home. And Duolingo has been really great about allowing UWC students to take that test for free if you cannot pay for the test. So do consider that as an option, especially if you are required to do an English test. You are going to have to make sure that the colleges that you are submitting to are those colleges that will accept it. The good news, I'm always looking for silver linings, as you can hear. The test scores in general are going to have less and less of an influence on the college admissions process. We're seeing it now, we're seeing it this year, and I think that that is going to be the case going forward. The good news for all UWC students is that you are in an IB curriculum. This is an internationally recognized, robust curriculum. We recognize that you are working hard and getting prepared for high-level college academics. Students who complete the diploma program are usually really well prepared for the work that you're going to see in college. You completed an extended essay, which is sort of a practice for the type of writing that you'll have to do in college. And so college admissions officers are confident that having your IB is enough of preparation that we don't need additional tests to prove that you're ready for our institutions. And then the work that companies are doing to make tests more available online from home is something that I think we're going to see more and more of in the future. And so I think that it's nice for you, obviously you're in places all over the world to be able to take those tests without having to travel. So looking forward, Middlebury, I'd like to share with you just a little bit more about how this year has looked on the college side of things. Middlebury has just finished making decisions for the class of 2025. We are going to be releasing those decisions coming up this weekend on Saturday. So if you have friends that have applied to Middlebury, they will find out pretty soon. But I ran the numbers yesterday just to sort of see where we were at in terms of testing and how it has influenced Middlebury admissions this year. And I was really interested to see that 50% of the students who applied to Middlebury this year submitted tests, and 50% of the students who applied to Middlebury this year did not submit tests. And of our admitted students, exactly 50% who were admitted had test scores in their files, and exactly 50% of students who applied to Middlebury did not have test scores in their files. So as you can see, I think that colleges have done a lot of work on our end to make sure that we are finding ways to evaluate students without test scores. What are those factors that lead to sort of an academic rating? It could be anything from the IB classes that you've chosen, how you're doing in your classes over time, predicted grades, and I know that's a tricky subject in the IB this year. But there's lots of ways that we can evaluate your academic preparation for our colleges, and I don't think that we're going to need as much testing in the future, which is a really exciting avenue that our colleges have started to go down. As you know from the news, SAT and some of the standardized tests have sort of been, it's long been known that tests sort of correlate with family income. And we are pleased that we do not need to sort of worry about that as a factor as much anymore. So with that, I will turn it back over to Marty and sort of see if there's any questions that you'd like to ask about testing before we move on to the next presentation. I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Great. Thank you very much, Karen. That was very helpful, and I hopefully gave students a little bit of comfort moving forward. And I know we do have some questions, so I will pose those to you. First one up is, as an international student, what exempts me from doing the proficiency tests? Does taking English literature, language, English A or English B, perhaps, or literature count as sufficient?
Great question, and this is going to vary from one school to the next. At Middlebury, if you've been in 4 years of English instruction in your during high school, that would exempt you from needing an English language test. Or if you're in English A, we would not need you to take a test. But if you're in English B, that may be due to scheduling, but we will want to make sure that you've taken one of the tests and submitted that to us.
Great, that's important. And so another student asked that's a similar question about whether taking English A or literature would be taken instead. We also saw a question about SATs, taking the SATs. If it is test optional, what's the key criteria that you're looking at without taking into consideration SAT? Since you didn't have those to look at for students that didn't submit the 50% that didn't submit that you then admitted, what were the main criteria you were making your decisions on?
Great question. Really, the factors that would influence our reading of an F file academically would include things like the rigor of the curriculum, and that's going to be pretty standard for UWC students in the IB. But what classes you've chosen to take? Are you taking English A, English B? How are you mixing that with the other classes? Quality of writing. So we're looking at what you are writing in your essay or any sort of additional information that you send along. Just things like intellectual curiosity. What are you doing with your time outside of school? That doesn't need to be all academic extracurriculars, but we want to make sure that sort of you are naturally curious person who's looking to do, gets excited about coming to school and learning more about the world.
That's a great answer. I know that we're now seeing a bunch of similar questions popping in the chat that are about this very topic, about the disadvantage if students who don't take SAT and aren't able to, that don't submit, are they disadvantaged at all in the process? And there are some schools that have policies that might not be as crystal clear as you're making it for your students, because obviously at Middlebury, 50% applied who were test optional, 50% who were admitted were test optional. So clearly that didn't have an impact on the bottom line for your students. But can you talk more generally about the disadvantage or not if you weren't able to take an SAT, clearly through a variety of different possible reasons, what that means, what would have meant to Middlebury in terms of disadvantage? Because there's 3 or 4 questions in a row that are popping on exactly.
Right. I don't know. I mean, the numbers haven't all come out. All of us are sort of just finishing up our cycle this year, and many of us are newly test optional. So it'll be curious to see how other colleges are reporting. But I think our hope as an industry is that we are not disadvantaging students because they have not been able to take the SAT. Mostly, it's not. You haven't had the option to take the SAT, so we don't want to disadvantage you in that way. And we don't know whether you had the option to take the SAT or not. It's really your decision whether you want to submit those scores or not. And so I think you'll have to work with your counselors to figure out whether or not you feel like you want to submit those scores. But I do think that most colleges are sort of stepping away from needing it or even sort of using it in the admission process.
So what I'm hearing is it's students who do have SATs aren't necessarily going to be advantaged because they did submit scores, and certainly international students who couldn't take the SAT or wouldn't for various reasons are not going to be disadvantaged. That seems to be the biggest concern I'm hearing in the chat.
I mean, I think that's our hope. It's hard to transition sometimes. You heard that Middlebury, the numbers were pretty clear that it doesn't really matter, but I can't say that across the board for all of my colleagues.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, Karen.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. I'm going to transition now to Francesca Edwards from Bennington College in Vermont, and she's going to run us through her thoughts on applying early and what that means. I know we saw some questions popping up that were specific to Middlebury about applying early, when they can do that. But those questions are certainly good to ask for the individual college representatives in their rooms. So until, Fran, in terms of your topic now, applying early, I know that's a big concern. I know some of the counselors had asked to maybe talk about how financial aid is impacted at at your campus versus other campuses for those that are applying early. So I know there'll be a lot of questions on that too. So for those students that are watching, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A piece, and we'll get to those at the end of Fran's presentation. So Fran, please take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And again, I share Karen's sentiments. These events, being in many ways forced to be virtual this year has really allowed us to be able to connect with more of you intimately, in many ways, one-on-one. So it's a privilege to be here, and thank you for listening to us. So again, my name is Francesca Edwards. I'm representing Bennington today. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been asked to talk about what to know when you're applying early. So many of you will be thinking about submitting early applications, and I hope that this presentation will walk you through the things to consider and really have conversations with your counselor about when you're considering submitting applications early. So the first thing that I really wanted to talk about, and in many ways demystify, is actually the word, here we are. The use of acronyms in early college applications. So I remember when I was applying to college, the amount of different acronyms and what they meant was especially confusing to me at first. And so I really wanted just to take a moment to really walk through the different types of early applications that you might be considering and what they actually mean. And so there are two main ways that students can apply early to colleges and universities in the US. The third is a little more rare, but we'll still walk through it. So the first option is known as early action. So many of you might know this more broadly as EA. The acronym tends to be used, but essentially early action applications are when a student submits an application for admission to a college before typically the regular deadline through early action, and they receive a decision earlier than other students who applied regular as well. So you might hear the term non-binding a lot, or binding. And essentially what that means is, if you're admitted to a college, do you then, are you binded to attend? So through early action, essentially the process for considering whether to attend is the same as if you applied regular. You still have typically until May 1 to decide. The only difference is you've done the work to submit the application early. On the college side, we want to really respect that and give you a decision earlier too. So typically applications due in October, November, or December. You receive your admission decision normally early in the following year. And the key is that you still apply to other colleges under regular decision. So even when you're applying early action to a specific college in the US, you still want to be working on your regular applications as well, and making sure you're staying on top of those, because oftentimes you'll find out after the regular deadline has passed, and you want to be sure you're covering your bases. So again, early action, non-binding. If you're admitted to a college, you still have the choice to say no, to say yes, and you still have that good length of time, even longer, to really consider your options. The other common way to apply early is known as early decision. And so this is a binding application. You only apply to one institution through an early decision agreement. And essentially you're saying, hey, you're my top choice school. If you admit me, and barring extenuating circumstances, which is a really crucial piece, right? So for example, financial aid, barring extenuating circumstances, if it is possible for me to attend, I will be at your school come this fall. And so it's a sign of commitment. It's a sign of saying that you've identified this school as your top choice. And that binding agreement is how you're making that commitment. You're signing a document that says, if you accept me, I will attend. Again, it's really important to still be working on your regular decision applications as well. So even though you can only apply to one school through early decision, you want to make sure that you're working on other applications as well. Once you are admitted early decision, if you're accepted, you have to withdraw all your applications from other colleges. Again, you made that commitment. And I do want to just kind of highlight that extenuating circumstances point again, and certainly I can only speak to Bennington, but I know that, this is the standpoint of the majority of colleges, right? Let's say you're admitted to a school that doesn't manage to meet your need financially. And so you're admitted under an early decision binding agreement. It can't work financially. You're not going to be kind of having someone knock on your door at home and come and kind of get you on a plane and take you to campus. Students can be released from that decision if, again, there's those extenuating circumstances that happen. And again, the other shift compared to early action is that you do decide whether you're going to accept that place. You've already said that you will attend, but it's a formalized way of saying that, yes, I'm enrolling, and you'll submit your enrollment deposit or fee at an earlier date as well. We won't spend too long on this third option. It's pretty rare and it's becoming rarer. But essentially, there's another option called single choice early action. So this is almost as though if early action and early decision had a child, it would be single choice early action. So it's the same plan as early action in that it's not binding, but you can only apply to one school. So essentially, you're making that same commitment statement as you do in an early decision, but without that binding agreement. You can still say no, even though you're only applying to one school, but you're having the chance to show that same level of interest. But again, that's pretty rare. And for the most part, you'll be choosing whether to apply early action, or if you have your top choice school and everything works out, applying early decision is often a benefit. So the other kind of key consideration with applying early is financial aid. And I know that Cassie will talk more in depth about financial aid, but we'll just run through kind of the impact of applying early on financial aid. So I think the biggest thing to note is that, just as Karen was talking about with testing, every college will have a different policy in awarding financial aid to international applicants. So one really key factor is that some schools reserve financial aid for regular decision. And this is because they want to be able to consider all of their pool and distribute their funds in the way that makes most sense to them. And so you want to make sure that if you are applying for financial aid and you have chosen your school that you're going to apply early decision or early action to, you want to make sure that they do award financial aid in those rounds and that you're not going to either be deferred or not have your need met because they're, again, waiting to see the entire pool before they submit awards. Some schools require you to apply early to be considered for financial aid. So it's just the opposite rule. So again, every college is different. Make sure you're doing your research. And then, like Bennington College, some schools have the exact same financial aid process, the majority of schools, across all application rounds and plans. One key difference is sometimes you'll see that schools have different admit rates between rounds. So at some of your larger research institutions, you might see, the early round admit rates for international students are almost double the rate as regular. That's a really important thing to kind of make a note of, in that oftentimes that's somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Early applicants and the early pool tends to be stronger on the whole than regular decision pools. So you want to be sure that when you're looking at those admit rates and the difference, if you're using that as a big consideration of where to apply, that you're taking it somewhat with a pinch of salt, knowing that students, if they're applying early, they're hopefully submitting their best application. So be sure to do your research. Know that every school is going to have different policies. So it's crucial to know before you apply what those differences are. One other kind of key thing to remember is that as UWC students, when you're applying to Davis schools, you're in a very special position, both in terms of kind of the admissions process and financial aid. So when you're looking at details about financial aid on websites, make sure that you're understanding whether that is the same or different for UWC students. For example, Bennington College isn't able to make the statement that we can meet every international student's financial need, but we do make that commitment to UWC students. So again, kind of understanding that there'll be different answers based on the college and also as your position as a UWC student. And then finally, you want to consider academics. Colleges always want to see a steady or an upward trend in your grades. And so you want to think about, if I'm going to submit my best application in an early round, and I'm looking and I only have my transcripts up to 11th grade, is that strong? Is that the strongest application that I could submit? Or if I wait until my fall grades of senior year have been released and I apply with those during regular, will that strengthen my application? So again, make sure to do your research. One final couple of considerations that Karen was just talking about is remembering just timeline. You want to be planning early so you can ensure that if the schools that you're choosing to apply early to require standardized testing, that you're able to safely take that test and submit it. And again, there's a number of online options. If so, do they have minimum scores? Do you meet the academic profile for successful applicants? Sometimes you might not be able to get all of that information on the website. So remember that as counselors, we're always here to talk to you and talk you through our specific colleges, what a successful student looks like, and how to thrive through the application process. And again, there's no other resource like your current school counselors. And so in thinking about broadly when to apply early, you might have heard some common themes throughout those different sections. So first, that you've done your research. If you're applying early decision, make sure that you have truly done yourself due diligence and you've researched across broadly institutions and colleges in the US so that you can say with certainty, yes, this is my top choice school and I am comfortable making this, commitment and binding agreement. And similarly, you still want to be thinking about that with early action too. You've prepared and can submit your strongest application. So thinking about that academic trajectory, thinking about timeline, about research. And finally, you know that the financial aid policy of the school that you're applying to, and it works for you, that they are offering the aid that you need in those early rounds, and that you're prepared in both applying for that, and also you have all of that crucial information around it. And then finally, your academic profile meets that of successful applicants. Again, talk to your counselors, talk to us. We really do love just learning about you one-on-one, but also making sure that our applicants can put their best foot forward. So I just left my contact information up there as well, just in case any of you have any questions about applying early, about Bennington College's approach. Please feel free to email me. And if you have any questions, I believe we have maybe a minute or two to address one, but thank you so much again.
Thank you, Fran. And yes, I do have a couple of questions, some of which you've already answered. One was on applying via ED, but not awarded sufficient financial aid. Will that make my enrollment unfeasible? You did answer that. And you said, obviously, that is an out. If you don't get adequate financial aid package, that would not be binding in that way. And the question from Alexander was, is restrictive equivalent to binding? And if not, are EA and ED restrictive?
Yes, so in many ways they're synonymous with each other. So early action in many ways is not restrictive. Again, there's no binding agreement there. You're applying early and you're receiving your decision early. And beyond that, you're showing a level of commitment of putting your best foot forward, of doing your work early and getting that in. But it's early decision that is the binding and restrictive option. So again, you can only apply to one school. If you're admitted barring extenuating circumstances, you will enroll and you'll submit your deposit and enrollment fee early. But again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be preparing your other applications for regular decision. Again, if the financial aid package doesn't work out, if you have also extenuating circumstances at home or just related to your ability to attend school that year, be sure that you've got those other options planned out as well.
Okay, great. Couple final questions, and we'll get on to our final presentation. If they apply EA or ED, should they submit their Term 2 grades or Term 3 predictive? And how much do predictives influence my acceptance?
That's a great question. So if you apply early action or early decision, oftentimes you won't have your mid-year grades available yet, but you probably will have some form of predicted grades. So definitely your counselors will submit everything they have on their side. And so you can be sure that if you have predicted grades, as soon as grades become available, your counselors are sharing that with the colleges that you're applying to. And so again, that was that key piece. If you're a student who's saying, I need to strengthen my grades, I would prefer to have my full grades on my transcript. Oftentimes you're not able to do that until midway through the review process of those early rounds. So you want to be sure to consider that. In terms of it influencing your admission with your predicted grades are a strong indicator of where a student's going to land. And for the majority of international students in many education systems, that's all we have in terms of kind of assessing a student's senior year progression. So definitely we do lean into them, and I can only speak for Bennington in terms of how important they are. But we do lean into them as an indicator of where you're going to land in the diploma program. But certainly what you've attained thus far is you know, their grades that you have, they're accurate, but we do consider them.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Fran. And there are some other questions that we don't have time for today, but if those who have asked them want to ask them to Fran and when she gets to her room after the presentations are done, I'm sure she'll be able to answer those for you. So thank you, Fran. And next up, to wrap up our first hour before we move to the college fair portion, we have Cassie Grosser from Wartburg College in Iowa, and I'll let her take it from here. Go ahead, Cassie.
Great, thank you, Marty. Can you see my screen okay? I hope. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here this morning, and we're grateful for the opportunity to connect virtually. Of course, we wish we were in person with all of you today, but at least we can connect virtually. And thank you, Marty, for providing the opportunity to do so. My name is Cassie Grosser. I serve as the Associate Director for Global Admissions at Wartburg College. And today I'm going to be talking to you about securing financial aid as a Davis Scholar. Okay, so obviously there are some costs to expect when becoming an international student in the US. Traditional direct educational expenses would be tuition and fees, room and board, or a meal plan. And sometimes what is surprising to a lot of our Davis scholars, and maybe what they forget or don't know before they come to the US, is taxes are also an expense that Davis scholars should be prepared for. So I won't go into all of the specifics just because it's oftentimes challenging to explain taxes, you know, right here within the 10 minutes that we have. And it's a very complex system within the US, but just be aware that it is an expense. And I do have a brief explanation there that says the US and the state governments consider any scholarship money that you receive as a student that exceeds tuition costs to be taxable income. So just know, because you are a Davis Scholar and oftentimes you're receiving scholarship from an institution and also through the Davis Scholarship, you will be taxed a percentage of that scholarship money, and you will be asked to pay that to the US and state governments. Now, every institution has their own process as to how they advise Davis scholars within this process. So know that we are available to help you through that. Some institutions are very involved and maybe we'll have you file taxes together right on campus, but some, you know, say, hey, we're going to advise that you go to a tax professional to help you and assist you with this process. But just be aware that that does exist. And so hopefully that's not a surprise to you. Other expenses you can expect, of course, books, supplies, organization fees, class fees, health insurance. So a lot of our schools require that you have health insurance, and sometimes schools will say, yes, you can bring in your own, but some will require that you actually, you pay for the health insurance that they partner with. So it's important to be aware that that is an expense too. And obviously it's to benefit you and to make sure that you're covered in your 4 years at your college or university, to ensure that you're safe and you're able to visit a clinic if you need to. Travel to campus or over summer, of course, flights will definitely be some of the expenses that you'll need to plan for. And then through the visa process. So it's important to know, obviously, the visa application. There is a fee for that. There's a fee for the CVIS I-901 fee that you will have to pay. So just be aware that those are expenses that you do need to be prepared to pay for as well. Some schools offer assistance with some of these other expenses, but some schools do not. And so again, it's just important to be in conversation with your schools that you're considering to ensure that you understand what their financial aid covers. And then, of course, just pocket money. You want to be prepared to have some money on hand for fun and to be able to enjoy your time in the U.S. Okay, so to talk about applying for financial aid, there are a couple of forms that are commonly used by a lot of our institutions. They're provided by the College Board, and they are the CSS profile, which does have a small fee of $25 for students to complete online. And then also the International Student Financial Aid Application, or commonly known as ISFA, another acronym for you to remember. But that document is actually free. So these two forms are commonly used for our universities and colleges to collect financial information from your family. So they will ask questions like, what does your family income consist of? How many people live in your home? How many people are in college right now in your household? And what do you feel that you're able to pay or to contribute toward your education in the US? So it's our way to really ensure that you have a plan and you have the ability to contribute to your education for any remaining costs that is not covered by scholarships. So we definitely have to do that before we issue any forms for the visa, to ensure that you are able to pay for any remaining costs again. And then other institutional forms, some schools decide that they want to use their own internal forms to collect that information. And so again, going back to, it's really up to you to reach out to all of your schools to kind of learn about the process overall and to see what information is required of you to apply for financial aid. And then when you are completing these forms, it's really important that you're honest. Oftentimes as schools, we have limited resources available to provide scholarships and grants for students. So it's important that we are using those resources and we're providing those resources, or we're allocating those resources to the students that absolutely need the scholarships and the grants. So it's just very important that you're honest when completing that. Fran did an excellent job at covering early decision, but I did want to mention, obviously, financial aid is a big piece in that. So just be aware that if you are considering, or if you know you need financial aid, sometimes it's helpful to apply for early decision, but then recognizing, of course, that would be a binding agreement if you are admitted, except for if the financial aid does not meet your need completely. And then, of course, it's important for demonstrating your interest. It's saying to the school that, yes, I'm interested, you are my top choice, and if I'm admitted, I will go. So it's important to follow those guidelines as well. But when applying for financial aid overall, it's just really important that you start early. So for our IB1 students here today, we're glad that you're here and you're getting this information. As soon as you can, start looking into some of your schools that you're interested in and looking at what's required of you. What important dates do you need to know in terms of financial aid? Because sometimes schools do they ask students to apply for their larger scholarships earlier than maybe their standard scholarships. So it's just important to know that you'll need to pay attention to dates through the process. And then I did want to touch on campus employment. This is one way for you to fund or help fund your education. And oftentimes the campus employment is included in our financial aid packages. And just be aware that visa regulations will allow international students to work up to 20 hours when classes in session and up to 40 hours during breaks. So that is an opportunity for you to earn some money. It's not money that's given to you right away. It's essentially saying, hey, you've been awarded campus employment, but that is assuming that you're going to work and you're going to use some of your work earnings to pay for your educational expenses. So just be aware that that exists. Okay, so then types of aid. So scholarships and grants, they are of course money that you don't need to worry about paying back. So they could be merit-based, based on your academic performance. They can be based on need. So again, oftentimes for need-based aid, any school that provides that is going to ask that you complete one of those forms, those financial aid forms, to collect your financial aid information. There are also talent-based scholarships. So if you're involved in athletics or music, maybe based on your specific major, some schools provide different scholarships for that. In some cases, some schools do provide some institutional loans. So just be aware that that might be an option for you. And then of course, there are private loans out there. A lot of times for international students though, they require that you have a US citizen cosigner. So just be aware that could be challenging for a lot of our students to get private loans, but some schools offer their own institutional loans. And then, of course, the Davis Scholarship is a huge help for funding your education at the U.S. Universities. And as a Davis partner, all the Davis partner schools, we have committed to ensuring that our education can be accessible to all Davis UWC scholars. So we're committed to meeting your need and to making sure that you can get here and to study at one of our great institutions. So you're very blessed to be considered for the Davis Scholarship, and we're very blessed to be a partner with that initiative also. Okay, so some common misconceptions that I sometimes hear, one would be I should expect a full scholarship. Just to be clear, full scholarships are very, very rare. So regardless of how generous your scholarship package is, just know that there oftentimes are expenses that are not covered. So it's a good idea to really talk with your admissions counselors, ensure that you fully understand your package, what fees and expenses are covered and what fees and expenses are not, and make sure you have a plan to pay for those additional expenses if they're not covered by scholarship. And then another misconception I hear sometimes is other countries offer financial aid just like the US. And just know that all countries are very different in the ways that they handle financial aid. And obviously in the US, the pricing for higher education is very, very different than other countries. And oftentimes it's a lot higher than other countries, but just know that we oftentimes offer a lot more financial aid than in other countries because of that. So be aware that, that might be a reason why maybe your US or your high school counselor might be might be saying or wanting you to maybe at least take a glance at some of our U.S. colleges and universities, because we do offer, significant financial aid, but also because there are partner institutions with the Davis Scholarship that would obviously help with funding your education experience. So that's just something to be aware that all countries kind of handle financial aid a little bit different for college and universities. Okay, and then the last one I hear sometimes is my high school counselor can help me get more financial aid. And that is not true. Your high school counselors are really great resources for us to get to know you better as a student. So that's why we sometimes will ask them to submit recommendation letters. Maybe we'll have follow-up conversations regarding your academic standing, but really they have no say in your financial aid and what you're awarded by any institution. So just be aware of that. If you have any questions or concerns, or you just don't quite understand your package, I would encourage you to reach out to the university or college representative directly just to clarify, because we're eager to connect with you, and we want to ensure that you fully understand before you come. Okay, and then here are some questions that you could possibly ask your admissions counselors and the admissions representatives here today even. So I don't know if you want to take a picture of this to help in your conversations, but these are just some questions that I would encourage all students to be thinking about, and there are schools that they're interested in as they continue their conversations and continue their college search. Okay, I think that's it. This is my contact information, and I think we have a couple minutes, so I will open it up for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Cassie. And just a reminder to folks, the recordings to these presentations, along with the PDFs of the presentations themselves, will be available on the landing page for the event tomorrow. So you will be able to access this information in case you weren't able to get it all down right now. And it looks like we just have a minute to prepare everybody for the next steps for the college fair. So I will thank my presenters, Karen, Fran, and Cassie. Thanks so much for your outstanding advice today. I'll give them a minute to get to their college rooms before we dismiss you. And thanks again, Karen and Fran and Cassie. So you're allowed to go now and get ready for the next steps. So for those of you who are joining me in the chat still, we are going to be transitioning to the college fair portion in just a couple of minutes. We want to give Fran, Cassie, and Karen a chance to get into their rooms. What you're seeing now is the landing page for the college event today, the college fair event. And I want to point out a couple of pieces of information here that will help you get ready. So as soon as I close this event, you will automatically be redirected to this landing page. So what I would encourage you to do is to favorite this page so that you have it or bookmark it, whatever you want to do, because you'll be going back to it often over the next 2.5 hours. So what we're going to do in just a couple minutes is release you from here. I'm also going to put in the chat for this session, I'm going to put the link to this landing page so you have that as well. And that will be available to you so that you can find your way to it. So this is something that you will have access to in just a minute or so as I give our folks a chance to get into their rooms. But as you'll see, on the left-hand side of the page, you have the names of the college, website, and either email, director of admissions, or a particular person to schedule an interview, or an actual link to set up a time to schedule an interview. The links under the college name, Bard College, Bates, Bennington, Bowdoin, Colgate, all the way down the list. These are links to their Zoom rooms. So what you'll do is after you leave this session, you'll go to this page and then go into each of the rooms that you wish to check out and talk with the representatives. We have 26 Davis partner schools with us today, so they're all eager to speak with you. There are two representatives here that have different times for their morning and afternoon sessions in the U.S. times, and that is Concordia College and Union College. If you're interested in either of those, for those that are attending now, you want to click on the AM session. Even though it might be afternoon or evening where you are, click on the AM session link for this during the next 2.5 hours. That will get you to them. So for both Concordia and Union College, click on the AM session link if you want to go to their meeting room. All the rest of the names of their colleges are the direct links to their Zoom rooms. So that's the way that will work. So hopefully you can find your way to those rooms after we're done here. And I'm going to be dropping the link to the chat in the chat. So everybody will get this link. And hopefully you see that in the chat. You're welcome to go to that. Everybody should have that link. You can click on that link and then please be sure to bookmark it so that you can come back to it after you're done visiting the different colleges. The first college that you want to visit, you'll have a chance to visit the rest. So I'm going to release you to the meeting now, to the colleges now. So I wish you the best of luck. Thanks so much for making this a part of your day today. And we hope you have some very productive conversations in the days and weeks to come as you find the school that's right for you. So until next time, thanks for coming and have a great day.